Hey, hey, hey. You know who it is. It's Zeus Cruz of Olympian Multimedia giving you another segment of Get Things Done. In this particular segment, if you follow me here to the whiteboard, we're going to break down for you guys today. I thought it would be kind of neat and instructive for you guys, for those out there aspiring to start getting into your musical projects, to get the fundamental understanding of how to approach your music project. Yes, you could go all in with the type of equipment that you got, software that you're utilizing, and go ahead and start doing different things with that. But sometimes it's good to kind of plan out and gain that understanding, that perspective of exactly what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to your music production. So I'm kind of provided on here this whiteboard a little bit of a template to kind of illustrate how you can go about gaining that knowledge and that understanding when it comes to the basics and fundamentals of music production. So if you see, I got it, the layout for music production. So you're going to be making music of some sort. So I broke it down into 5 elements in which you will go about producing your music, producing your vocals, right? So, and it's not in no particular order, but you might want to add some synths into your production. So you're going to need either a synthesizer or some type of MIDI equipment, instrument that'll allow you to mimic synths and how to go about producing them. Synths add some really nice textures to your melody. You can create a beat simply off of synths if you were looking to have that retro 80s, 90s type of sound. You guys know I'm a big fan of. But usually with synths, it's pretty much done in accordance with your melody. Just again, to add more substance, a little bit more flair to it. From there, you're going to import some drums into your production. And usually the drums is inputted through some pads. Usually. So you might want to get some understanding on that as well. On how you're going to input your drums. You can use stock inventory to just layer the drums out on a track, or you could be a little bit more authentic and have a little bit more control by utilizing pads. You might be the type of producer that just wants to use samples. So you're going to need something that could be that sampler for you, that you could pull these different types of snippets from different types of audios that you come about. And you can use these samples as a premise to go about and really fleshing out your music and your beat. Then, of course, as I just said, you're going to inject some melody into your production. That's basically the foundation for your beats. And then usually you will input it with some keys. You can't input the melody through pads. So it's all up to you as a producer to figure out how are you going to go about manipulating sounds and inputting them into your music project. Are you going to be more about using keys and playing out different chords on the keyboard versus using the pads and inputting them that way? There's a certain level of technique when it comes to using the pads. So definitely it's going to probably take a lot of practice on your part. But only you can decide how you will go about injecting these different types of sounds and textures into your music production if you utilize both. You also can utilize the computer in it itself as well. So you may not be inclined to wanting to use any type of instruments, both MIDI or any kind of live instruments. You might just want to actually use the computer keyboard and create what are called hotkeys, which are basically shortcuts for whatever audio editing software that you're using to allow you to go ahead and make your beat. And then last but not least, it's obvious you're going to need a microphone. if you're going to inject and input vocals. But also using microphones is good too if you want to do vocal samples or Vox samples. Vox samples are vocal samples with some type of effect or synth attached to it. So you might want to be more organic and develop your own through the microphone. Or again, you could just use some stock inventory as well. Once you determine on how you're going to go about making your beat, from there you want to decide what DAW you want to use. DAW is Digital Audio Workstation. So the audio editing software, again, do your research. Find one that you're more comfortable with. When I say comfortable, I mean as far as the layout of the interface, it's something that is easy for you to just latch onto and go ahead and start creating. You definitely don't want to get into a situation where it's overly complex and complicated. Then it's going to take you so long to go about learning, which means it's going to prohibit you from producing your music, right? So once you determine the DAW, then you want to determine your presets, and also they're called plugins. So most DAWs come with their own inventory of presets that you can use to start laying out your production and start adding little things in there to, again, create that texture, that substance. Or you can use, usually this is called stock inventory when it comes to presets associated with the DAW. But you can also go to third-party vendors and start creating your library of plugins. Why is this important? Because it just adds a little bit more of a flow to your overall process of making beats. It just gets things more organized if you just have this inventory that you can go to and I can utilize these things. Plugins is exactly how the word is. It's basically a piece of software that you're literally plugging in into your music production, and then again you can manipulate it the way you see fit and input it to your overall production. From there, don't mind the drawing. I'm sorry. I hope you get the gist of it. But this is supposed to illustrate a mixing board or a mixing desk. You can get a soundboard mixer by itself and input it into your computer and sync it to your DAW. But most DAWs already have a mixing board attached to it. So again, you need to determine what you want to do with that. If you want to go ahead and just utilize the one that's within the DAW, or if you want to utilize a separate mixing soundboard mixer as another piece of equipment. Most people use a soundboard mixer if they're going to input some type of live instruments, or they want to plug their microphone so that they can adjust the levels on the fly a lot more quicker. They will input the microphone into the soundboard mixer. Again, these are all things you need to determine on your own. If you're using the soundboard mixer, it's pretty much broke down. And again, I'm just illustrating to you guys the basics. So if you notice here, you have tuners that allow you to control the EQ. And then you have a section here with some faders to control the overall level of your production. To inject the right amount of gain into it as well. It all starts with the loudness, normalization of your beat, making sure everything is going accordingly. Everything's more fluent, especially when it comes to the frequencies. You might want to get an understanding too of how you're going to go about recording. So there's pretty much three main ways to go about it. You can record in solo, which isolates the track on its own to allow you to do more precise mixing within that track. Also, just a quick note, understand that tracks and songs are not the same. Tracks comprise or make up a song. So every sound, every instrument that you input into your music production will be layered out within tracks. Most DAWs have pretty much an infinity amount or unlimited amount of tracks that you can utilize. But you can record in solo. You can also record in mono, which allows all the elements to combine in one channel. So no matter what you input as the different sounds, the different instruments, if it is more easier for you in your process to kind of put all these tracks, all these different elements into one channel, you might want to look into recording in mono, or you can record in stereo, which is more than 2 channels that you're inputting all these different types of sounds from your tracks, and then you can go about again mixing them and really sculpting out your musical production. And then last but not least, as far as the basics are concerned for your mixing board, you have an element on here called panning. Panning is very important when it comes to production. Panning allows you to kind of offset the sounds that you're manipulating and make it more to the left or more to the right. The reason why that's important to utilize panning in your production is because it gives your sound that more orchestrated feel. Like, once people are listening to your production, it really encompasses them in a total circumference. And then you can break down each sound or each instrument or loop that you're inputting into these tracks. You might want to offset them, one coming from the left and one coming from the right. Just a lot of equalization that's getting involved in there to allowing the listener to really encompass and really listen to every piece of sound that's inputted into your production. We're not going to go into depth right now of when to utilize pan. Just know it's very important. Again, do your research to get a real good understanding of when to use it. But it's definitely an element that you should be utilizing in your production. From there, you want to create a subgroup. What are subgroups? Well, basically the layout of your DAW in which all the different types of sounds that you're inputting, you might want to create a group for it. So if you have several tracks dedicated to like your keys, to the melody, you might want to offset that into one subgroup. If you have several tracks dedicated to your drums, and if you're including your bass line along with the drums, you might want to put that in a subgroup. Your vocals, you might want to put that all in a subgroup. Definitely vocals is going to take multiple tracks. That will be very smart and intuitive on your part to put them in a subgroup. Again, this just adds to organization and makes your workflow a lot more fluent, easygoing, to getting an understanding of what all the elements that is comprised or produced within your production. This is not necessary. Some people tell you it is, but this is just from my opinion. It's not necessary to make subgroups. All I'm saying is it makes your job easier if you develop this. From there, you're going to create the master bus. So the master bus is basically all the subgroups that you made. You put it into the master bus. The master bus usually is within 2 channels, in which you go ahead and you're going to elevate the levels, get an understanding of the frequencies, your high end, your low end, and make sure, again, everything is fluent, that each sound that's inputted is not overtaking the other. It's a bad situation, guys, if you get into in this type of scenario where you have your vocals. They might have all the clarity in the world. I can listen to every word you said, or you're singing, or you're rapping, however you go about putting your vocals out, but you hardly hear no beat. It's like a very, 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 very distant afterthought. So the vocals are there, but I don't hear no beat accompanying hardly with the vocals. Or your beat is outstanding, but I didn't hear words you just said, sang, spoken word, recited, sung, rap, nothing. I don't hear any of that. That's a bad situation. So this is important for you to get that understanding of how to go about positioning your levels, understand the whole concept when it comes to frequencies. And with the master bus, this is going to allow you to get ready for mastering. So here, this is what I call like a soft mix. So it's basically mixing on the fly as you're recording. You could do small configurations here and there to kind of equal everything out. Once everything has been produced, then you could go ahead and do what is called a hard mix, when you're really starting to really lay out exactly what you're trying to do within your production. And then from there, you're going to go into the mastering process. And that's why you would create a mastering chain, as you see here on the bottom, which is a series of processing tools that allows you to really hone in exactly what type of sound you're trying to sculpt, and it sounds exactly how you want it. But also, too, to make it so that the sound is as equally as good between you hearing it through studio monitors, through your earbuds, through headphones, or the stereo in your car. It's very important that you keep this in mind, because you don't know how the listener is listening to your music. So you have to keep that in mind as far as making sure everything is loud enough and with clarity when they're listening to your music. That's why you need a mastering chain. You need these series of processing tools. I gave you a short list provided over here. These are not all of the tools. There's a plethora more, but these are the main ones, or pretty much go-tos for most producers, is using a mastering EQ, a compression, saturation, a de-esser, and a reverb. There's other ones as well, as like flanger, gate, that you can utilize. Again, we're not going to go in depth as far as what each one does. Again, do your research so that you get that understanding. But the basic gist of using these processing tools is to balance the mix, control the dynamics. Remember, we just touched base on that. You have certain elements of your beat. Some are louder than others. That's a problem. Everything should be equaled. Listener gets an understanding. They can hear every little piece of sound being inputted. Dynamics is the overall tone of your beat, however. You definitely want your beat to be impactful. You want people to listen to it, and they're getting that bump. You know, that little, once they start moving them shoulders, you know how it is. You start listening to something, now you start moving them shoulders, you start getting into your groove. That means the dynamics are great within that beat or that production. If somebody listen to it and they're not really feeling a groove, and that shoulder comes to a stop, and they're just kind of sitting there like, what do we got going on here? Maybe your beat is not as impactful, or your production is not as impactful as you think it is. And then, last but not least, reduce the strength of the frequencies and bring consistency to them. And that goes back to you getting the understanding of how the beat or your production is structured. From your high end, the main things that you want the listener to listen to, and then your low end, the things that just the little effects, maybe like a little piece of a synth produced in there, just to add that little bit of texture, just a little bit of more flair to it, give the beat a little bit more of a vibe. But you don't necessarily want that in the forefront for the listener to listen to. So that's the basic the functionality when it comes to understanding frequencies. And again, reducing it, but finding consistency. You need to find that within your production. You don't want your production to be all over the place, where people don't really get an understanding of what you're trying to do within it. So let me see. That's about it. I think I cover all the steps here. This is just a basic template that I wanted to provide for you guys. You know, I definitely recommend, before you get into music, that you kind of do one of these and kind of just do a quick understanding. Do your research so that you don't go into it blind. You definitely want to put the best quality of work out there, right? You just don't want to put out some production just to put out some production, just to say, oh, look at me, I'm a producer. Oh, look at me, I'm a musical artist. You definitely want to put your best work out there, and utilizing some of these steps hopefully will help you out. So that's it. You know, so I hope this was informative. I hope you enjoyed the video. You know who it is. It's Zeus Cruz of Olympic Multimedia. And the only thing left to say is get things done. Check you later.